On MLK Day, I want to remind you how he was viewed at the time, because we often forget. So I want to show you this short clip here from Fusion, and then we're going to come back and break it down.
Most know Martin Luther King for his "I Have a Dream" speech, but that doesn't paint the whole picture. King didn't just preach a message of anti-racism. He also fought against U.S. imperialism abroad and income inequality domestically. He was seen as such a threat to power that Bobby Kennedy authorized the FBI to wiretap him for 5 years. Why did those in power want to monitor Martin Luther King? Well, the official reason was to see if he had any ties to the communists. But the FBI kept the wiretaps going even after they found nothing to suggest that King had any ties to the Soviet Union or the Communist Party. Instead, the FBI focused on King's private sex life in a failed attempt to discredit his radical message. It's easy to overlook how radical Martin Luther King's message was, even by today's standards. Listen to what he said about a universal basic income.
One of the answers, it seems to me, is a guaranteed annual income, a guaranteed minimum income.
Universal basic income is an idea that's gaining some traction these days, but it's still on the fringes of political discourse. He also pushed other ideas that few public figures would touch today, like a redistribution of wealth. And he called the United States the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. So it's no surprise that Martin Luther King was widely hated by people in power at the time. In 1963, John F. Kennedy said this about him.
The trouble with King is so hot these days. It's like moths coming to the White House.
Kennedy's successor, Lyndon Johnson, reportedly had these nice words to say about Martin Luther King. I'll just let you read it because there's no way I'm saying that on camera. No, I'm not saying it. I'm not touching that. I'm not touching it. And this was the guy who signed the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act. I mean, think about what other people in the government must have been saying about him. But perhaps the most infamous incident was the letter sent to Dr. King by the FBI in which they threatened to expose his sexual affairs unless he stepped aside. The letter has some truly insane passages, such as, "Satan could not do more. What incredible evilness. It's all there on the record, your sexual orgies. Listen to yourself, you filthy, abnormal animal."
The establishment absolutely despised MLK. It wasn't even close. Wasn't even close. And as they laid out there, even the good guys despised him. So when you talk about Lyndon B. Johnson, yeah, he signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. He did the war on poverty. So in some ways, he actually wasn't even a bad president. Obviously, Vietnam was a disaster, and he escalated that. But it was the guns and butter policy. The butter part was good. JFK often views, oh my God, so liberal. He's so liberal, he's so progressive, he's one of the best presidents ever. Well, he escalated in Vietnam. He also, by the way, did covert actions in Cuba to try to topple them and make it a puppet state again of the U.S. So he wasn't as liberal as everybody thought. And then you heard him talking about MLK right there. I don't want that guy in the White House. I don't know what you're talking about. So, and those are the good guys. Imagine what, the real Southern Dixiecrats. To be fair, Lyndon Johnson was a Dixiecrat, but he famously said when he signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, the Democratic Party is losing the South for a generation right now. Because he knew the Democratic Party, so the Democratic Party in the South, the Dixiecrats, those were conservative Democrats who were openly racist and openly pro-segregation. So he knew, well, I'm going to sign this bill and give black people equal rights. Well, they're going to lose. They're never going to vote for Democrats again. And that is more or less what happened. But imagine what they were saying about MLK. You got to understand, it wasn't an uncommon thing for people to call him a terrorist for non-violently, peacefully protesting for equal opportunity and justice. And then you saw the rest of it. Oftentimes, people like to try to, cleanse the rest of his message and spruce it up for a modern audience where they go, no, see, his whole thing was just, racial justice and equality. That's all it is. So don't even, in many ways, he's actually really conservative. This is an article that came out the other day. They do this every MLK, that he was a true conservative. Well, only if you lump into the bin of conservatism being massively anti-Vietnam, calling the U.S. government the greatest purveyor of violence, saying inequality in healthcare is the worst kind of inequality. So he was in favor of a universal healthcare system, calling for a universal basic income, a living wage. He was assassinated while protesting with unions to try to get a better deal and better working conditions and better wages. So, no, perhaps the only thing he was conservative on was the LGBTQ community. Because at that time, unfortunately, that was the overwhelming consensus in the country among everybody on the political spectrum. So, but outside of that, the dude was a crusader on behalf of working people. And he famously said, look, I'm not just fighting to liberate the oppressed. I'm fighting to liberate the oppressor. I have love for my enemies because I know that if you're holding people down, keeping them second-class citizens, oftentimes quite literally lynching them, you have hate in your heart. And that hate means you not only do you not love other people, you don't love yourself. You're in your own mental chains. So I'm not just here to liberate the oppressed. I'm here to liberate the oppressor. And that's why his message of nonviolent resistance was so strong, because it worked. It worked. You won in the realm of public opinion over time because you took the moral high ground and you fought from a position of justice. So you didn't revert to the tactics of the savages you were opposing. I'm going to repeat that. You didn't revert to the tactics of the savages you were opposing. So they use violence. They try to crack down. If you had used it, well, then all of a sudden you muddy the moral waters and people go, I don't know, they did violence and they did violence. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? Maybe they're equally bad. Who knows? But no, not only was your value system and your ideology correct, the things you were fighting for, but your goals in trying to achieve it, or the process that you took in trying to achieve it, the means, the method, that was accurate, that was spot on, and you kept the moral high ground the entire time. And then when people look back and they see the Alabama sheriffs turning the water hoses and the dogs on the peaceful protesters, they go, this isn't even close. We have a picture of pure good and pure evil right in front of us. The Alabama sheriffs are the pure evil. The black protesters and the liberal protesters are correct. They are correct. And history over time said, you know what? We can't lie to ourselves here. That guy's right. These people were wrong. So let's not just limit it, though, to what he was talking about with race. Because that's what we say now. Oh, obviously the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, that was correct, except the Supreme Court obviously said, I don't know about that. Let's roll back the Voting Rights Act, because what are you saying? Mississippi is more racist than New York? How crazy are you? No, that's exactly what it is. Of course that's what it is. How do you not see that? But let's also remember, the guy was fighting for a living wage. The guy was fighting for a universal basic income. The guy was fighting for a free healthcare system. The guy was out there saying the U.S. is an imperialist government. My government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. We are killing massive numbers of innocent brown people, and we got to stop it. But there's no question that, look, he's one of my heroes. I can't tell you countless nights I've spent watching MLK speeches, Malcolm X speeches, and you have to understand that the way to honor the legacy is not just to do, whatever, celebrate it once a year, you get a day off from work, and you watch TV. The way to honor their legacy is to continue the fight, because if Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X was around today, they would be the first ones out there saying, oh, we're going to fight for a living wage. We're going to fight to end all these wars. We're going to fight probably for free college. We're going to take all these progressive priorities which try to foster a system with equal opportunity, and we're going to get it. And I'm sure they would continue on to fight for racial justice. So, for example, with all the police shootings of unarmed black people, I'm sure they would say, all right, we're going to do reform. We're going to, for example, try to get body cameras on all the police officers across the country. At a federal level, you pass a bill like that. We're going to get special prosecutors so that instead of somebody who's the buddy of the police officer who murdered an innocent black person, instead of that person trying to bring them up on trial, because they'll throw the case, obviously, as they've done multiple times, we'll get special prosecutors to do it. And there are so many ways to address these problems that are real. Ending the drug war would overnight cut down on not just the injustice against everybody, but definitely the injustice in a racial sense too, because the drug war is used disproportionately to crack down on minority communities. So there are so many concrete steps that can be taken to make a better world when it comes to race relations, and to make a better world when it comes to justice for everybody, economic justice, justice in foreign policy, that our work is not done, and it's never done. So we need to pick up the mantle and keep running with it, because we got to leave a legacy behind too, our generation. And, we could be the generation that gets money out of politics and ends the over-the-top corruption which has bought our government and made it the disaster it is. It's the problem that births all other problems, money in politics and corruption. We can get a constitutional amendment to end that. We can get a single-payer system. We can get a free college bill. We can make the minimum wage a living wage and tie it to inflation. So the work's not done, and we got to keep running forward, and let's do it in the name of a great man like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.